Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Boston Tea Party Podcast, part of the All Day Football Show. I'm your host, as always, Jackson Kellogg, and today we're getting into episode number 17, the first of the off-season. Patriots didn't make the playoffs this year, finishing 7-9, and they do have some things they're going to have to clean up in the off-season if they're going to want to get back to competing next year. And that's what we're going over in today's episode, going over pending Patriots free agents, quarterback options in the off-season, as well as ranking the offseason needs for the Patriots, going over their draft capital and who they could get with those top picks. So looking at the key pending free agents for the Patriots, these are the top 21 free agents for the Patriots. Looking on the offensive side, you've got quarterbacks Cam Newton, Brian Hoyer, running backs James White, Rex Burkhead, fullback Jakob Johnson, wide receiver Damiere Byrd, offensive lineman Joe Thuney, Jermaine Illuminor, and David Andrews, and kicker Nick Folk. I know he's not offense. I just didn't want to make a whole separate thing for just Nick Folk. And on the defensive side of the ball, we have defensive tackles Lawrence Guy, Adam Butler, defensive ends John Simon, Dietrich Wise, linebackers Shalik Calhoun, Brandon Copeland, cornerbacks J.C. Jackson, Jason McCourty, and Justin Bethel, though Bethel is more of a special teams guy, and safeties Terrence Brooks and Cody Davis, and Davis is more of a special teams guy. So these are, in my opinion, the top 21 free agents for the Patriots this offseason. Guys that they're going to have to decide, are they going to want to keep or are they going to want to let walk? And if it was my decision, so starting with keeps, I'm keeping running back James White. He's been a serviceable running back for the Patriots these last few years, especially in the passing game, being one of the better passing down backs in the league. He doesn't get a ton of carries, but he's utilized a lot in the screen game and is a great outlet option for whatever quarterback is playing next year. And I think he'd be an important piece in the Patriots' offense next offseason. And he's a cheap option as well, as he won't command anything near the $10 million that running backs are starting to get at least nowadays. I'm thinking somewhere around maybe $5 million annually. Fullback Jakob Johnson I'd bring back to compete with Dan Vitale for the fullback spot next year, as Vitale opted out of the season and Jakob Johnson filled in very well in that spot. He was definitely serviceable coming in as an international player from Germany, so as part of the NFL international program. I think it would be a good competition there to get a really nice fullback or get the better of the two, as the Patriots use fullbacks often in their offense. I'd keep Jermaine Illuminor and David Andrews on the offensive line. Andrews is the heart and soul of that offensive line, coming back this year from blood clots after being out all of the previous year. And Jermaine Illuminor was serviceable in the loss of Marcus Cannon to opt-outs. So between him and Onwenu, they both filled in very well in that spot. So with Thuney walking, or most likely walking, Onwenu will fill in with the left guard spot, which would leave Illuminor, if he's re-signed, to compete with Marcus Cannon for the right tackle spot. And even if Illuminor didn't win it, he'd be easily the swing tackle, and he'd also compete with now second-year player Justin Herron, who was a rookie last year and didn't do too bad in the left tackle spot, filling in for Isaiah Wynn when he was out. So the Patriots are in a very good spot on the offensive line, and I'd also bring back kicker Nick Folk. He got better as the year went on, and hit multiple game winners and had a few clutch kicks that were definitely needed for the Patriots to win some games, including one against the Jets, where his kick in the last few seconds prevented the Patriots from losing to, at the time, the winless Jets. So thank goodness that didn't happen. Looking at the defensive side of the ball, I'm keeping defensive tackles Lawrence Guy, Adam Butler. Lawrence Guy is just about the only good run defender the Patriots had last year, so I'm keeping him around even though he is on the older side. And Adam Butler was a great pass-rushing defensive tackle. He made play after play in the second half of the season. Was definitely a need on that defensive line. I'm bringing back defensive end Dietrich Wise as a rotational piece on the edge sides, as he was helpful in the pass rush, but he could definitely use work in his run defending skills. I'm bringing back linebacker Shalik Calhoun for more of a rotational piece and special teams, as he's not necessarily a every down linebacker, but he makes plays when necessary and is good on special teams. The most important free agent for the Patriots this offseason is cornerback J.C. Jackson, who was second in the league in interceptions this year with 9 interceptions on the year in a backup role for half the season. So J.C. Jackson is debated as to what he can do as a corner. I think he's a low-end cornerback 1, high-end cornerback 2. He can do well as the starting corner. He was okay with Gilmore out and being the number 1 corner, but he did have his issues. But when he's on like a wide receiver 2, he's shut down. So I do think that is important to have, especially in today's NFL with air raid offense becoming a thing. So with J.C. Jackson is going to be important to keep, and even if they don't keep him, he is a restricted free agent. And Bill Belichick will probably place a first-round tender on him. So if he gets an offer that the Patriots do not want to match, then the Patriots will get a first-round pick out of it. So it's a win-win either way. And I'm keeping cornerback Justin Bethel for special teams, as between him and Matthew Slater, they have been such a tandem on the gunner roles of the special teams, whether it's punts and kicks. I didn't throw Matthew Slater on here just because he is getting older, and if he chooses to retire, he said that he's not playing anywhere else but New England, so I didn't think it was a need to put him on here. If New England doesn't re-sign him, then he's going to retire anyway. So players that I'm going to let walk are quarterbacks Cam Newton and Brian Hoyer. Brian Hoyer was an easy let go. Even though he beat Stidham out in camp, he could not beat him out in legitimate gameplay, as Hoyer was awful in the one game he played in against the Chiefs, and that forced the Patriots to put Stidham in. Cam Newton, I've gone over my assessment of Cam Newton multiple times this year. He's a great guy in the locker room, great personality, overall humble guy, but he's just fallen off a cliff in terms of his play. Some of the play from him does have to fall onto his weapons, but another part of it does have to do with him, as when you watch the games, it's a mixture of both his weapons and himself. Even when his receivers finally would get open, he threw the ball at their feet. So there's no other way to put it. Cam Newton's time in New England as a starter is over. I wouldn't want to bring him back. If he wants to come back on a cheap backup role and mentor whoever they bring in, fine. But other than that, I do not want him starting for the Patriots next year. I'm letting running back Rex Burkhead go because the Patriots are going to be bringing Brendan Bolden back off of opt-outs. And J.J. Taylor served well as a undrafted free agent this past year. So between Taylor and Bolden and Burkhead, there would be a fight to see who can get the 4th running back slot, as Michelle, Harris, and White would take 1, 2, and 3, meaning the 3 of them would fight for the 4th spot, possibly a 5th, which means one of those guys is the odd man out, and I think it's going to be Rex Burkhead, as Taylor showed better flashes last year and is younger. Burkhead did have an up year last year, playing very well in the games that he played in, including that 3-touchdown game. I forget exactly who that opponent was off the top of my head, but he'd played very well, better than he had a few years prior, because I haven't been very high on Burkhead, so it was nice to see him have some games where he was successful, but he is getting up there in age and isn't that serviceable to New England anymore. I'm letting wide receiver Damiere Byrd go. They brought him in as what they thought would be more of a depth piece, which in turn led him to being the starting wide receiver at times, and he just wasn't useful in the passing game. He had his moments, but other than that, he wasn't a big factor, and eventually led to Jakobi Meyers being thrown into the wide receiver 1 slot, which Meyers shockingly did well in. I wouldn't consider Meyers a wide receiver 1, which is why wide receiver is one of the Patriots' top needs this offseason, as Meyers will be great as a Z receiver, but they need to bring in an X. And once Edelman comes back as the Y to be in the slot, this Patriots wide receiving group can be a bit better. I'm letting Joe Thuney go because he's going to cost way too much and he's going to reset the offensive guard market. He's going to command somewhere around $15 million a year, if not more, and the Patriots simply won't be able to afford that this year with other moves that they could make. I'm letting John Simon go because he's just declined every year he's been with the Patriots. He did not play well last year in the pass rush or run stopping, which he was never a run stopper, but his only saving grace was pass rush, and he wasn't even that this year. So John Simon I'm letting go, as well as linebacker Brandon Copeland, who barely played and even due to injuries, but he was more of a rotational piece anyway, and he's getting older, so I'm going to let him go. I don't think this move will happen. I just did it as if I'm doing it. Cornerback Jason McCourty, he was slow and eventually lost his starting job to J.C. Jackson. He's been great in his career, but he's easily on the decline of the mountain, and it could get really steep, as it looked to be last year, as wide receivers were simply just running by him. So I hate to be negative about Devin McCourty's brother here, but I would let him go. As well as safeties Terrence Brooks, Cody Davis. Terrence Brooks never developed, and he's been awful in times where they've had to put him on the field. And Cody Davis was injured last year, and they don't need him on special teams anymore. So with the amazingness of Bethel, so Davis should be out as well. So easily the number one need for the Patriots this offseason is quarterback, as the only quarterback they have under contract is Jarrett Stidham, and Belichick has made it clear that he doesn't think Stidham is the future. So I've outlined different quarterbacks that the Patriots could trade for as well as sign this offseason. So we'll start with trades. Minnesota's Kirk Cousins has been thrown into trade talks with the 49ers. There have been multiple reports that the 49ers offered a second-round pick, a fourth-round pick, as well as Jimmy Garoppolo for Kirk Cousins. Sounds like the Vikings want a first-round pick from reports. These aren't like ESPN or NFL reports. These are kind of like third-party. So we'll see if those are actually true. I don't think Kirk Cousins is worth a first-round pick, but if the Patriots want to trade their second and maybe two of their fourths, I think that would be worth it for Kirk Cousins, maybe even throwing Jarrett Stidham in there and letting the Vikings figure that out. Matt Ryan from the Falcons. I don't think the Falcons will trade him due to his contract and how it is, but with how the Falcons are in the fourth spot in the draft, they're in a position to be able to get someone like Zach Wilson, Justin Fields, Trey Lance. So they might be looking to get their quarterback of the future, or they could just run with Matt Ryan for another few years. Houston's Deshaun Watson. That's just been an ongoing debate for the last month now. I just saw a report that Watson would be willing to sit out for 2021 if they didn't trade him. I haven't seen any proof of that. His agent came out on Twitter not too long ago saying that like most of the reports about what's been going on with him are completely false. So it's not really understood what's going on with that situation right now. Deshaun Watson will command way too much, though, after the trade that happened between the Lions and the Rams. Originally, I had Goff and Stafford on here as trades, but they both traded with each other. So analyzing that trade really quick, at first glance, it is an overpay by the Rams for Stafford, especially because, 2 first-round picks, a second, and Goff for Stafford. I think that's a lot. The Rams clearly don't value their first-round picks, though, as much as everyone else. Their GM, forget his name off the top of my head, but they've traded every first-round pick they've had since drafting Goff. So they're rolling with getting proven talent other than trying to roll the dice with the draft. I respect it. The draft we've seen in the last few years has been hit or miss with talent. So we'll see how that goes for them. But moving on, the Jets, Sam Darnold. The Jets are in a position to draft Justin Fields or Zach Wilson with the second overall pick. There were talks that they might take Trevor Lawrence with the first, but then they lost that spot after winning 2 games between the Rams and the Browns this season. So if the Jets draft someone, that's going to mean Sam Darnold is most likely out of there. And Sam Darnold wouldn't be too hard to get commanding possibly only a third or fourth round pick for him. San Francisco's Jimmy Garoppolo, former Patriot, who the Patriots traded him away for a second round pick. I think this time around, a third round pick is all that would be needed to get him. Due to his injury history, it sounds like the 49ers are going to keep him unless they can get someone who they feel is a better option. George Kittle came out and said that Jimmy Garoppolo can win them a Super Bowl. So Kittle likes him. I'm guessing he's a good locker room presence. And why wouldn't he be? He's a good quarterback for him. He's dealt with injuries. And the one season he was healthy all year, they went to the Super Bowl. So you got to look at it in that aspect. And I'd be willing to throw Jacksonville's Gardner Minshew in there, who with the Jags having the first overall pick, they're going to take Trevor Lawrence, who's going to start from day one. So that means Minshew is out of there. And I think Minshew might be a good development project, as he's shown flashes over the last 2 years. He's definitely played better than Dwayne Haskins, who just got signed by the Pittsburgh Steelers. So Minshew wouldn't be too bad of a look of going to get, and he'd be super cheap to go get, only calling for possibly a fourth or fifth round pick. So looking at free agents, I threw Cam Newton at the top of the list just because he is technically a free agent and did come from New England this offseason. Though I don't want him back, that is still technically an option for the Patriots to do this offseason. I don't think there's going to be a massive market for Cam unless it's for a backup job, and I don't think that's what he wants. Cowboys, Dak Prescott, he's probably going to get tagged again this offseason, which I don't think he's going to be happy with. But the Cowboys would be dumb to let him go, as with how the Cowboys played this year, it showed that Dak is a necessity of this team. Zeke had his worst year of his career this year, and they have plenty of talent to surround Dak with between Amari Cooper, Michael Gallup, and CeeDee Lamb. Dalton Schultz had a good year this year. They still have Zeke, Tony Pollard. It's just a good offense. They got to fix the O-line, but I don't think it would be a smart decision to let Dak walk. The Dolphins, Ryan Fitzpatrick, he is older, so he would be a bridge quarterback. If they sign him, I would hope that they draft someone between the range of Mac Jones, Kyle Trask, and Jamie Newman to develop under Fitzpatrick. But Fitzpatrick could be another Cam Newton where it's just a one-year deal and he starts for the whole year. One of my favorite options to go out and get would be New Orleans' is Jameis Winston. There's signs that the Saints want to re-sign him. I think that'll be tough to do considering their cap situation where they're $100 million over the cap. So that would be tough to deal with. But Jameis Winston, I think, is a viable option for the Patriots, as with the help of the coaching staff of the Patriots. Though I'm not a big fan of Josh McDaniels, I do think he can help the quarterback situation. Another option the next few options I actually wouldn't mind bringing in, whether it's Mitch Trubisky, who showed great promise at the end of last year for the Bears. He was easily better than Nick Foles, and I don't think that was a smart decision to bench Nick Foles. And it sounds like the Bears are gonna let Trubisky walk, so he'd be a cheap option to go get this offseason as on a 1-year prove-it deal. And I think that would help the Patriots a lot in judging their quarterback situation. I think another 1-year prove-it deal that would be good for them on a younger quarterback, the Colts' Jacoby Brissett, who the Patriots traded to the Colts a few years ago for wide receiver Philip Dorsett. Jacoby Brissett was serviceable in the year that Andrew Luck retired, though he didn't play at a star level, so the Colts went out and signed Phillip Rivers last offseason. And it showed that the Colts were again not a quarterback away, as they lost in the wildcard round this past offseason, and Phillip Rivers retired. So that leaves Jacoby Brissett out on the streets, and I wouldn't hate the idea of bringing him back. And the last option that I could think of was Dallas's Andy Dalton, who, when Dak went down with his injury, they brought Andy Dalton in as the backup. And he played well in the games that he played in. He definitely was not his old self, but he was good as a fringe starter, and I do think that is an option for him, and he will command a market this offseason for what he did as a possible fringe starter and a veteran to compete with younger quarterbacks who teams don't know if they're the future or not, say like the Jets or the Broncos. So all these options I think are on the table for the Patriots. I think the only expensive one would be Dak Prescott and the Cowboys, because that would cost over $40 million annually, as well as Deshaun Watson, who that would cost somewhere around like 4 first-round picks, which the Patriots can't pay for, so we'll see how that situation all comes out. If I had to pick the most likely option, I would possibly go with either Jameis Mitch or Jacoby coming in as a free agent. I think that would be the most likely option out of all of these. Top offseason needs. Speaking of quarterbacks, the quarterback is the top offseason need for the Patriots. We've proven that you need a quarterback to be successful in this league, and the Patriots do not have one, so they have to go out get a quarterback. No matter who it is, whether it's a veteran or draft someone, they need a quarterback. Second need I'm going with is wide receiver. Jacoby Myers is the only definitive wide receiver on the roster. Julian Edelman could straight up retire this offseason, and he did, other than the Seahawks game, showed a decline, though he was playing through a knee injury for most of his time playing. Wide receiver, they need to go get a wide receiver, one, if not two of them. There's plenty of options out there, whether it's Allen Robinson, Kenny Golladay, Juju Smith-Schuster, Chris Godwin. The people are endless. In my opinion, would want to go for, I'd sign both Corey Davis and Curtis Samuel, get the two of them, or get Chris Godwin and one of the other two. The Patriots can easily afford it with this offseason, with a COVID offseason, where a lot of teams are going to have to be shedding cap instead of signing players. And I do think it is an option. Defensive tackle, I think, is the third option, the big defensive need. And I would say defensive tackle more as run stopping. The Patriots need run stoppers on this defense, on both the defensive tackle and around the edges. So, though pass rush is an issue, I think stopping the run is an even bigger issue for the Patriots. If they stop the run, they're going to force offenses to pass. And the Patriots' defensive backs, they're one of the best secondaries in the league, between Gilmore, J.C. Jackson, Jonathan Jones, Jawan Williams has been serviceable, Devin McCourty, Adrian Phillips, Kyle Duggar. The names, those are all great starters for the Patriots in that secondary between corners and safeties. So I do not think that pass rush is more of a need than run stopping. So if I'm signing front seven players this offseason for the Patriots, I'm getting run stoppers over pass rushers. And I'm going to throw tight end as another need. Not so much on the younger side. I'm going for a veteran who can help lead Asiasi and Dalton Keene in that locker room. Neither of them played great last year. It's tight ends usually take time to develop. Even Gronk wasn't amazing in his first year. So if I'm looking for a tight end, I think if Hunter Henry doesn't come to the Patriots, then I'd leave all other options out there. Some defensive players I would like to get: Dalvin Tomlinson and Trey Hendrickson. Both guys have been dominant on the defensive line, and Trey Hendrickson just had a career year. And the Saints are going to have a hard time paying him. And the Giants, though I don't think they'll want Dalvin Tomlinson to walk, the Giants have a bunch of players on the defensive line that they're going to have to pay. So Tomlinson might be the odd guy out there. And then you can just read the rest of the list for other needs, as they're not as important. And even punter being cut off at the end after Jake Bailey just got a All-Pro selection this year. Last thing that we'll be covering today is Patriots draft capital. They have a total of 10 picks, including 1 first-rounder, 1 second, 1 third, 3 fourth-round picks, a 5th, 2 sixth, and a 7th. So the Patriots lost their original third-round pick due to the Bengals recording the game scandal. So they lost a third-round pick from that, but they got a third back from a compensatory for Brady. Jesus, you let Brady walk and you get a third-round pick in return. And now he's in the Super Bowl. What a world. The other two compensatory fourth-round picks come from Calvin Noy and Jamie Collins, and the extra sixth-round pick came from a trade with the Cowboys. So the Patriots currently have 10 picks. Their first-round pick is at the 15th slot, which is a very rough spot to be in for this offseason, as I'd say there are 5 top quarterback options, and 4 of them are going to be gone before the Patriots pick. And the last guy, Mac Jones, in the bottom right of the pictures there, has looked great. He's the guy I've looked at the most film and stuff on so far. He looks great. So if I had to judge him off of what he's done on film now, he's very accurate. And I think his negatives are he cannot throw on the run, and his footwork needs some work. But he's a good decision maker. He's accurate, and he has arm strength. So I think if they draft him, they should bring in a guy like Fitzpatrick for him to sit behind, work on his footwork, work on his ability to be a little bit more mobile. But Mac Jones, I'd be a little bit questionable at 15th. If the Patriots can trade back a little bit, maybe, and get him a little later. If not, some other players that might be available for the Patriots include wide receivers Devontae Smith, Jalen Waddle, and Rashad Bateman. Those are the 3 guys that I think would be closest to available and worth a 15th pick. Smith and Waddle both coming from Alabama. Smith winning the Heisman. I do think he still will be the second wide receiver off the board after Jamar Chase, who sat out the year from LSU. Devontae Smith, though he won the Heisman, the only thing people are questionable about with him is his size. Other than that, everything looks great with him between his route running, his hands, and his playmaking ability. Some other offensive weapons, Rondale Moore from Minnesota, as well as tight end Kyle Pitts out of Florida, who is easily a top tight end prospect this offseason, though I'd be a little sketchy about the Patriots drafting a tight end in the first round after trading up twice in the third last year to get 2 tight ends. Looking at some defensive guys who could be there, linebacker Micah Parsons, who's the top linebacker in the class, who could be a playmaker in the middle of the field, as well as defensive tackle Christian Barmore from Alabama, who was a run stuffer and a great defensive line presence for Alabama this past year, as well as Mac Jones, who I mentioned earlier at the quarterback spot. All these guys I would be acceptable taking at the 15th spot, except maybe Pitts. If I had to rank them in order, I'm going Devontae Smith, Waddle, Parsons, Mac, Moore, Barmore, Pitts. So that'd be the order that I'd want to take them in. All in all, this offseason is going to come down to the man on the right there, Bill Belichick. This is going to be one of the most important offseasons he's ever ran. Last year, he didn't have the cap space to make all the moves to put the Patriots in a place for them to succeed. This offseason, they're not gonna lose a ton of players that were good for them this year. So it's not like it's gonna be a complete reset. All this stuff that the Patriots are a few years out from the Super Bowl, I do think are false. I do think the Patriots, I don't think they'll make the Super Bowl this year, but I think they will be competitive and back in the playoffs this year if they make the right moves necessary. But like I said, it's going to come down to Bill Belichick's decision-making, who he's going to bring in at quarterback, and what weapons is he going to surround them with, as well as how is he going to fix the front end of the defense with the defensive line and linebacking core, as they need playmakers in there, as they just had a bunch of nobodies who weren't the greatest this past offseason. So in the end, I think this offseason has a chance to be very successful, one of the best of any teams. But if moves aren't made, then it can be an issue for the Patriots. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed, be sure to leave a like and subscribe. Hope you enjoyed. Soon I will be putting out a schedule for what I'll be doing for the offseason. There will be a game preview for the big game on Sunday between the Chiefs and the Buccaneers. I'll be previewing that matchup. And going into the offseason, I do have some fun plans that I have in mind, including a weekly Patriots series going over Patriots of the Past. That's actually the name of the series, as well as possibly doing live streams for free agency as well as the draft. So definitely an exciting offseason. I'm excited to put all these plans in place, and I hope you enjoy what I'll be doing. have a great rest of your week, and let's hope that the Patriots do what we want them to do this offseason to get back to competing next year.